with me.
My old friend, as you know, I've been so attracted to the theater and what it means and it can help us, and I'm convinced it can be, should be an essential ingredient of any notion of work on oneself and working with other people. And I've got some fancy theories based on the Enneagram and so on, but I wanted to talk to you as a person of this wide experience who has so inspired me by what you do, wide experience of as an actor and a director and so on. And just get you to talk about what are the components of theater? Uh, how is it made? Just let's start a conversation about it.
How is it made? I was teaching an acting class this morning, and I asked the student actors their responses on what we were doing, and one of them said, "I feel very self-conscious."
Ah, dreadful.
And we took apart the word self-conscious. There's a consciousness of self, which is, in my mind, a form of self-observation that can happen because of theater. And because of theater, we are invited to take on roles that are not in our habit pattern as people, as personalities. So when we step out of whatever our normal habit pattern is, there's a moment of self-consciousness. The word self-conscious gets misused to describe uncomfortableness or shy or awkwardness. But really, it's an opportunity to observe me. And we observe other people all the time. We have opinions about other people. We say, oh, that person's boring, or that person's funny, or that person's intellectual, or that person's whatever, and easily forget that we are one of those persons that everybody else sees and has an opinion about. I find that the methodologies of theater provide a really wonderful forum for those kind of observations. I don't know if that was the original reason for having theater, but it's certainly one of the byproducts of practicing it.
But this is very much because you're a practitioner and very near to the working experience. So the theater is for something for the actors because they can understand themselves better. But there's this other side, this public side. The theater is a, a manifestation, a showing forth, not just to the actors, the people involved, but to people who are not the actors, who come together so that something is happening to them. And how does it happen that there can be something happening to this audience, which isn't just like this ordinary picture of people being entertained and they sit back, so to speak, if it was a cinema with a popcorn or whatever it is, or having a drink at the bar and are titillated by whatever happens on stage, and they've got stars they are fans of and all that kind of thing. But well, because I know you've been concerned with seeing with people and with yourself where something, I can use the cause, it really happens to the audience, that something really is in there. And this stems back very much to that theater which you are very much engaged in, the original Greek theater, where imagine you have thousands of people in these audiences performing these plays, but what they were seeing was part of their lives and the meaning of their lives. And oh, you've got much to say on this, I know.
Well, we share a love of Greek theater, and one of the words I learned about Greek theater when I was young was the word catharsis. And nobody could adequately explain what that was or how that happened or who it happened to. This outpouring of something, awareness of humanity en masse. I don't know. However, the idea that something can be transubstantiated in people beyond just saying, oh, what a marvelous show, what great actors they were, that it was more of a sacred or religious without being ritualistic or adorational. It's an opportunity to reflect on my purpose as a human, what it is to be human, what it is to be a member of a family, what it is to be a member of a community, and how every single part and person in it affects the whole by their behavior. And it's that I find really fascinating in the language and the structure of the Greek tragedies in particular.
How is it in some ways that this, well, it's certainly as an obvious comment on this, that people watching a play, they can sort of have a vicarious experience by some kind of empathetic relationship with the characters, and there's also the factor, I know we use this term, the working from the Goethe work and so on, that it's often commented that the essential part of this work is in the feelings, in the emotions. And if it's not through the intellect as such, and not through physical effort, it's something in the feelings. And so this catharsis is something, a change in the emotions, so they reveal something to ourselves about ourselves and our situation. But this is very important when I use the word ourselves, because there's something generally which I think the theatre brings out, which sometimes missed in the language of the work, that is to say, is not just stuck in the isolated individual. There's something that say this action is not just an individual, and that's where it starts. It's an action, obviously, say, in a community, and it's an action which is only real together with other people. And I think this is a side of theatre which is amazing. So the audience is, and this is, I think, a kind of miracle in a sense, and people have theorized about it, but they're not just sitting there, as to say, to be entertained, to be stimulated from the outside, which is how it's really represented, but it's actually that they participate in the action. And what is shown to them is, in a sense, reminding them in some existential way of the reality they live in, which is more than what it appears.
Well, the form of the Greek tragedy includes the chorus, which is not choral, but it is communal. So this group of people represents, in a way, the audience, the common people that comment on the action. They provide wise counsel at certain times. They embody the fear and tremor that a mass of people experience. And that can be translated into the audience actually feeling things. I like to play with immersing the audience in the experience. So in our first series of readings of Oedipus, the audience were part of the chorus, and they were directed to participate in that so that they could not be passive voyeurs of an experience. Along with that idea, very important in the structure of the writing of the Greek tragedies, is that the characters often have intimate conversations, but they know they're having them in public. They know they're having them in public. It's not just that the audience is watching a private conversation through the fourth wall of the theater. They know the chorus is listening. And by virtue of that, the audience is listening. So they have a vested interest in gaining the approval and support of the people who are listening to them. If the king is speaking and he's saying, "I'm going to help you solve this plague," and the other person who is speaking says, "He's an idiot and a criminal," they're both in a public political debate to gain the attention of the audience. That's very different than private fourth wall theater, and makes it much more dynamic.
You're emphasizing this is really brought out in Greek theater.
It's built into it.
Built into it, yeah.
In the very same way, actually, that in Shakespeare, we know that Shakespeare has monologues. And
yes,
at the time that Shakespeare was writing, there would be no reason to perform a monologue like inside my own mind.
Yes, yes.
I would use the audience to agree with me or disagree with me. So at that point, I would literally walk out of the action and say, hey, what do you guys think? Happening? That's happening, and I'm a mess, and blah, blah, blah. Oh, wait a minute. She's back. The action's starting. Shh. And walk back into it. But when theaters moved indoors with electric lights, that the audience could be in the dark and microphones so
Yeah.
that actors didn't have to talk loud and they could think their own thoughts to themselves and go, wow, we're watching this guy's own thoughts, which at the time would have been a revelation. That's, we forget that it is in cahoots with the audience. You were talking about how important it is that there are witnessers, but they are witnesser participants. They are co-collaborators. They are people that I can make an alliance with, or people that I can defend, or people that I can warn and punish. In the case of Creon, he warns the chorus and then the audience, if any of you have transgressed this law, this is what's going to happen to you. And immediately says, well, I didn't kill Laius, and I don't know who did, but it's pretty important we go find them. Maybe Tiresias knows.
Oh, Jesai, that's created in my mind. There's something, and I'm trying to hold on to it now. A very extraordinary thing you see, but something I thought is important when you talk about the monologue and how extraordinary it is. And it's and
I do want to correct myself. It was Oedipus who said that. Creon
all right. And I
is
just
the one
remember
who fighted Tiresias.
a performance of Medea as Euripides, wasn't it? Where she and I just remember being blown away because what you brought into focus for me, maybe a distraction for what you were saying. I'm sorry. It was that it was ordinary, was something which we imagine that people are, so to speak, just talking to themselves or concerned with themselves. This whole mysterious region, which I don't think is ever understood, you know, talking to oneself, being oneself, being aware of oneself, with all these funny words we've got, you see, and we surely we think this is a private thing and so on. And in the theatre, that's totally transgressed in a way, because it's put out as something which is being seen. And it's an extraordinary thing. I've just got very excited about, and I can hardly begin to describe this thing about the importance of the monologue, because it's this ripping apart of the ordinary division. You have your private thoughts in your little mind, and this is not in the public domain. That's the ordinary world. I think it's a false representation of reality. And so what's going on is that people don't know their own minds, in fact. I mean, this is scientifically, empirically, so people do not know or how they think or what's going on in their own mind. It's a complete illusion, it's a pretense, it's poor literature and that sort of thing. But they do this, and it's connected in my mind with this sense of the theatre and so on, because it's realistic in a way because of this sense. And it may be just a belief or a fantasy that we are surrounded by consciousness, and it's consciousness itself which is aware. And we imagine we have the consciousness and we look out from ourselves, and I don't think it's right. And so this, in a way, the theatre, with its monologue in this situation, is being far more realistic than we are in ordinary life. I'm just sorry, I'm trying, so excited to, these things came up when you spoke.
I've been thinking a lot about the role of the audience. Because if they're not there, there's no theater. It's like,
what's the
if
point?
a tree falls in the forest, is there a sound if nobody hears it? Or if nothing here?
I'm going to interrupt you again, but what about the thing, you know, like with us now, we're talking and so on, and all life we go on, we got families and jobs and all this palaver going on in the world and so on. Is it something like people sort of maybe being frustrated or seeking for, you know, getting into a performance, which they're trying to do through other people in our jobs and families and all the rest of it, but it can never be really done very satisfactorily. And so what the theatre does to enable it to be done in this, I don't know, this artistic form, which is like a revelation of how it could be, but it's kind of broken up and not working in ordinary life. we're trying for the same thing, to get this revelation of the truth to ourselves.
Okay, say
Okay.
more.
Good.
I know you're going somewhere with that.
Well, no, I think it is going somewhere, but this, the thing of, well, that
I
is,
have a thought about that. I have a thought about that.
oh, please.
The thought was the like Shakespeare says, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players.
Oh, man.
The difference between a play written by Shakespeare and normal life is that everything that's written in the play is very intentional towards making a particular series of points. But in real life, rarely are we focused enough on anything in particular to create anything of real value. Maybe that's what Gurdjieff was talking about, of everyone needs an aim. And the more urgent the aim, the more life actually has meaning, because one is either moving towards the aim or away from the aim. And in theater and writing, everything, every single word in a well-written piece is guiding us towards a conclusion where we go, oh my God. And I think that's maybe what catharsis is, having this outpouring of the contradictions of what it is to be human and realize the truth of all of it. I'm rambling a little bit.
Well,
But
I ramble excessively.
I wanted to mention something about, was my little observation about what is tragedy.
Yes.
In these, this cycle of Oedipus, for instance, it's called a tragedy. Everybody dies. The whole line of Oedipus dies, and Creon is faced with the death of his son and his wife and Antigone. And the tragedy is not that everybody dies, because in comedies, everybody dies too. The tragedy is that Creon, for instance, in Antigone, feels that he made a law. Somebody transgressed the law. He said whoever transgresses the law should be put to death. It turns out that it's Antigone, a member of his family, that he then has to prove that the law is supreme and put her to death. He follows through with that against everybody's wishes, including Tiresias and his own son and the community, and says the law comes first, puts her in a cave to die a slow and painful death. And then Tiresias comes and warns him, you're the reason of this. You have to let her go, and you have to bury Polynices and give him funeral rites. And he says, no, I can't do that. I'm a king. I can't change. Kings can't admit they're wrong. And through the process, he realizes that he has to admit that he's wrong. That's an amazing moment theatrically. And when he realizes it, he says, okay, I'm going to bury Polynices and release Antigone. So he buries the corpse of Polynices with honor. He runs to the cave of Antigone. He opens it up, and Antigone has hung herself.
Oh.
So the point is, it's too late. And his son is there witnessing Antigone hanging herself. He was supposed to marry her. He accuses his father, kills himself in front of his father.
Ah.
And then when his wife hears about it, she kills herself. The tragedy is that he came to his senses too late. And there are lots of examples of that, that conscience is too late. Forgiving oneself or forgiving somebody else comes too late. We know it's the thing that has to be done, but the arrogance and the forthrightness and the belief in one's own supremacy is broken down too late. And that's painful. That's so sad.
But this, in tragedy, there's a side of this which I'd like to speak about, which is to the question of the hero character, or the not so hero, sometimes the anti-hero, like Macbeth. You could call him an anti-hero in a way, but they're sort of people whose lives are writ large. You know, have this like a king or some Oedipus is the extreme example, or something like this. But I'm just wondering about this realm for me. I'm trying to find the way to reconcile it with of what you, in a sense, you see on the stage is sleeping man. There's a there's always, particularly in Greek drama, it's like, or the Creon say, oh, the main character is blind. He doesn't realize what's really going on. He denies the truth. He's asleep. And this in the abstract formalism of the Enneagram is inbuilt. The outer circle is like one thing after another, and you never see the complete picture. So you're always blundering from one event to another. This is the portrait of an ordinary man. And I'm thinking of this mixture. So you get incredible characters, of course, like Hamlet and Macbeth in Shakespeare, and Oedipus in Sophocles. But something about Ibsen, Peer Gynt, which is supposed to be, in a way, when we're talking to Mr. Bennett about this, the portrayal of the folly or the sleep of ordinary man who's living in this dream world. It's blundering from one thing to another. So in a way, what's portrayed in it is that, because even would it have been the audience that's watching Oedipus Rex and so on, and they meant, well, this is a great king and he's brought to humiliation because he's a proud king and he's an extravagant thing. Can they ever see themselves in it? This is what you do all the time. You ignore the truth which is available. You don't listen, like to Tiresias. That was a whole wonderful metaphor. He's the blind prophet who really sees, and he's not listened to by Oedipus. But it's really, it's almost a portrayal of, and I'm jumping here, of course, a kind of Gurdjieffian theme of man is asleep, as a generalization, man is asleep. Imaginary conscious is the lie. And it's something put into a lot of plays, even if they're not making that an express teaching about that. And so, but then, and this is something which I'm really forcing a jump to, they also see in the play that it's like this thing, like I was just saying just now, which I'm groping after, in the sense that the true consciousness is not a matter of anything we can personally possess, but we may wake up to the fact that we are surrounded by it, surrounded by consciousness. And so with this situation is shown on the stage, and it's like an amplification of tendencies and others, and we actually see this is how it is. This is sleeping man. So it's a very, making a big generalization here, which, a dramatist and such wouldn't agree to. And that it is then to see why. Because there's something in plays, and I'm artificially pushing you towards this, I think. They're actually showing or suggesting, as you always have in Shakespeare, of this other reality, of a kind of divine reality, which is there. And it may not be explicitly spoken about, but it's also clear it's explicit in the Greek drama because of the oracle. For me, the oracle is a major player in Greek tragedy, because it's, you have the voice of the god, and it's always not being heard, not being listened to, not being understood. So I'm groping here, my friend, for this sense of what you see on the stage is always, in a sense, what you see portrayed on the character on the stage is the life of a sleeping man.
I remember reading an article of yours about the actor.
Oh.
And years ago, way before we met again. And I recall one line in it about, if we were awake, there would be no drama. There'd be no reason for theater. Theater is written about people who are not awake, and they're reacting within their own personality needs and desires,
Yeah.
and not being able to see other perspectives or our place in the universe. Or a couple things triggered in me. We were talking earlier about the role of the audience, not just the role, but that the actual drama is what's happening inside the minds of the spectators, because they are the ones who are making sense of it in response or in relation to their own personal drama in their lives.
Yes.
So I will remember something because, oh my God, that secret that Oedipus was so unaware of, that's like our family not telling us that our father was actually a Jew or something. That the secrets and lies passed down to generations of families is something
Oh,
common to,
right.
and we listen through our own personal stories rather than judge the the reality of somebody else that we're seeing on the screen. And if those actors are truly touched at the core of their being, then the mirror neurons will be stimulated in the spectators to feel something similar, perhaps the same emotions, which will trigger its very specific memories in their own life. And that I find really fascinating. That sure, we can put on a play, but the in Hamlet, he says, the play's the thing that will capture the, I don't remember exactly the quote, but show the guilt of the king.
Oh, yes, I remember.
So that they put on a play that is the story of exactly how his stepfather poisoned his father. And as soon as he sees it happen, he sees his stepfather react. So he knows he's guilty.
Mm, mm, mm.
So the play triggers the memory, which shows the guilt. And then there's another level of audience, the actual audience, who get to reflect on all those levels and get to see levels of reality in front of them. It's a fascinating form. When I went in drama school, I was hoping to be able to explore all these things. And many of the traditional drama schools are more like technical colleges.
Yes, yes.
Like you want to learn how to be a car mechanic, it will teach you how to take apart a car and put it back together. And in theater, it will teach you how to do the job of being a working actor in the repertory theater system. And secondarily, if there happens to be a good director or an insightful acting teacher, they might touch on why to do a particular play at this time. But beyond that, it's why do we do this play? Because it's a repertory season and we have to put on a comedy and a tragedy and a detective story and a musical because there's a wide range of people and we need audience. We need bums on seats. The festival of Dionysus in ancient Greece,
Yes.
as far as we know, held one time a year, not any day of the week that you want to go see a show if you live in New York.
Ah,
So it was an event, it was a spectacle, and people come with the expectation of receiving some nourishment for their soul. I imagine. They did say 70,000 people came with their goats and their families, and it's more like a festival. The people that love the event will sit down in the front, and the people who want to be there for the action, they'll be having a picnic up in the back.
yeah, yeah.
So there must have been levels of attention present there. But there was no other distractions. There wasn't stay at home and watch a movie or television or
Oh,
see a
lucky
story
people.
another way. It was grandfather tells us a story about their heritage, about live in person gone with their mouth.
Yeah.
And the same for the Greek tragedies. It was transmitted, and the comedies transmitted through voice, through the body, through vibration of sound in a space that was shared by everybody. And everybody knew that everybody was there.
That's
And that reality counts for a lot of the power of the spectacle.
there's something stirring from what you say. It's around, like you say, often I've given up any kind of notion that I have ideas or thoughts or anything. It's more like I get drifting through various kinds of cloud, or mist or something. And I was searching out for something coming up was about this something in the theatre which is something which is offered, which is only just, it's like possible. Maybe you say it's very rarely realized, whatever it is, but it's, again, I'm going back to the notion of the transformation of the feelings being central to the inner work. And one part of the feeling is that you can, with empathy, you can feel what other people feel. And it's this extraordinary sense, there were tentative explorations I had with Bennett, people had with Bennett, about these inner powers of the centers, like what it would be a conscious thought or a conscious feeling. The conscious feeling is something really remarkable, because it's a conscious feeling in which you sort of lose your sense of being a special case. You're having this particular kind of experience, or if it's happening to me, and it's not connected with what happens to you. When in fact everything you see, after all, this is what makes fiction viable, and the pretense word viable, because you enter into it because in some way it's real. And I'll just remind you a story I told you, maybe you've forgotten, but I don't know if it's relevant, but I really bring it in because it was a seminal experience for me. I never forgotten. I was about 4 or 5 at the time. It was during the war in England, and I was at nursery school. And we played this nursery rhyme, which contains the lines, "Here comes the candle to light you to bed, and here comes the chopper to chop off your head. Chop, chop, chop." Now, you might be fine, but that was the nursery rhyme in those days, in that culture and so on. And then the teacher played the role of the person being chopped. And then I saw that she was dead. She was dead. And for quite some hours, I was there crying and wailing. And the poor teacher was playing the piano to me and saying, "I'm not dead, I'm not dead." But she was dead. You see, that for me, Jesai, was like, if you like, the most seminal experience of theater I ever had.
Wow, that was catharsis.
That was total catharsis. But I can still see myself. I was about 4 or 5 years old, sitting by the piano and the teacher there, and this revelation of these two realities, so to speak, this kind of thing. And I think this is utter reality. And so all this word, like, I was very pleased with Ben was saying about, people say this and so is imagination. He said, okay, it's imagination, but imagination is incredible. Imagination is real. Like William Blake would do. Imagination is real. So there's something in the theater, the make-believe and so on. In a sense, you can make it more real than ordinary life, because you'd say ordinary life is a thinned-out version of reality, a mixed-up, clouded version. So you get these pristine things to do, which give us glimpses of insight. But I just wanted to say this about catharsis and the extraordinary sense, one can laugh at people who say, well, they cry at what they call a rom-com movie. The girls get the tissues and dry their eyes and they sob for what happens to the deer. We think it's silly and immature, and so anyway it is. But this threshold of these responses is something very precious, because it's entering into the world of being, the being world, where we're not separate. And so that's a whole other branch of revelation, which may be dismissed as being too highfalutin to take seriously, because it happens very much. But that's the key. The theater is possible because in some way we're all the same. We know how it is.
And a good story will remind us that, oh my God, that happened to me. I'm not alone. That happened to you too. Oh, incredible. From storytelling. Your memory of you at 4 or 5 years old, I was reminded of a cathartic memory that I had in theater. It was my first acting role in kindergarten. I went to a Catholic kindergarten, and I was playing one of the three kings. And we were in the wings of the theater of the whole school. Like the kindergartners were going to present the nativity story in front of the whole school.
Were you
With
part of you were a child then, or who were you at that time?
I was 5 years old. I was in kindergarten.
Oh, you were 5 years old. Oh my God. Go on,
Yeah.
sorry.
So this was me.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is a
yeah, yeah.
story of me being cast as one of the three kings. And in the wings, I had gold Christmas tree balls. I was bringing the gold, and the props were Christmas tree balls. And I dropped them backstage, and they all broke.
Oh,
And I was traumatized. I like, oh my God, I'm damned. I'm a failure. Like, what am I doing? And we have to go on, and I don't know what to do. And I remember a nun came over. My teachers were nuns, came over and found a gold box with macaronis on it that you glue macaronis on box and spray them gold and make gifts at Christmas. So she replaced it with that. So I had a prop to bring on, thank God. So I did my line. The three of us walked on, and one of them said, "There is a new star in the sky tonight." And the second king says, "It is the star of the new king." And the third king says, "Let us follow this star." And then we went out. And I guess the next scene was in the manger giving our gifts to the baby. But the memory of dropping the gold balls stayed with me as a symbolic metaphor for my search through theater in my life. Playing one of the wise men, dropping the gold before I get to go on, and then having a whole search for wisdom in my life. So I can actually carry the gold and deliver it.
that is so, it's so strange. Well, I think we were sharing this feeling for just a few moments in our life which have this absolute concrete reality about them, whatever it is, and they remain always, always.
Yeah.
And in a way, we should never explain them away or treat them as something to be solved or anything like that, because it's like I could almost say words, like silly words, association like that. That was the beginning for both of us of our awareness of the possibilities of theatre, as you said. It's remarkable. And so maybe because we limited time, unfortunately, wrap this up. We can make some comments just about this, furthering to this thing about trauma and the audiences, the Athenians, and this recent contact you've had with the theatre of war, and what they're trying to do, and your recent experience of them performing on Broadway.
Yes, 2 weeks ago, I performed in Times Square, Broadway, in theater of war production, a rehearsed reading called An Enemy of the People by Henrik Ibsen. And I've been following Brian Dory's in theater of war for a while. He's going to be coming to Costa Rica to facilitate our Oedipus cycle, the conversation with the audience afterwards. And I am more and more a believer that the theater event has to cover the part that the actors do and the part that the audience speaks to afterwards. And the handling of how they speak afterwards is what is powerful. Often when they have a talk back with the audience afterwards, it's with the actors, and the audience say, "Oh, that was a marvelous performance. How did you come up with that particular interpretation?" And that's not the point. So what Brian does, which is really great, is he removes the actors from the scene. The audience don't speak to the actors. The
Wow.
audience reflect what lines were powerful for them and why. What came up for you? What memories were twins? What touched your heart? And he encourages anybody who wants to speak to say something so that all the voices are heard. Nobody is corrected, nobody's criticized, there's no debate. The
Yeah.
mic is passed around to people who are touched very deeply and feel compelled to say something. And some people might say more of a, from a teaching perspective. Somebody else might say, I suffered post-traumatic stress disorder in Desert Storm, and this scene where Hercules killed his whole family is really relevant to me because once you start killing, there's an impulse where it's really hard to stop. And I've never said this in public before. So he targets, not targets, they use dramas to catalyze powerful conversations in different, well, I would say targeted groups, like veterans who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, communities that are suffering from gun violence and people have lost members of family, people in prisons, nurses in hospice that are dealing with deaths and violent crime all the time and patching up bodies, that their actual day-to-day experience is what is the reality of the Greek tragedies, the way they're written. And they are used as literally as triggers to catalyze powerful performances and responses, powerful sharing from people who really don't have an experience of theater necessarily. Now, they place this one show away, Enemy of the People, in the center of Broadway. That's obviously a theater town. But they put it in Times Square outside on top of the tickets booth, 200 people watching very well-known actors reading the roles of this play. It ends in a town meeting where the town decides what to do and ends up branding the guy who wants to save the town as an enemy of the people. And people were encouraged to speak in reference to their feelings around climate change and climate activism and what are the feelings that are coming up. And one person says, we need a revolution. Another person says, I'm really disturbed. My house is being flooded. So hearing from actual people who never would have shared those kinds of things, but the play is an excuse. The play is used as an excuse to cause sharing on a deep level. And I believe that that's the best and highest use of them. It is not to walk away and go, oh, that was wonderful. Wasn't he a good actor?
Yeah.
What should we have for dinner? Oh, prawns. I'd like some prawns and vodka tonic. No, there's something actually happening as a result of being there. And it's memorable. And one leaves with the feeling like, I just participated and shared in something. And there within that exists the idea of catharsis. The community has an experience of being in communion with each other and hearing each other, listening and hearing and seeing and being seen without judgment, without making somebody wrong or right, just listening and being grateful for the opportunity. So Brian Dory's managed to pull that off in the middle of Times Square with a ton of distractions and asked everyone to use their consciousness to focus their attention on what was happening here, not 10,000 billboards and buses and ambulances and passersby. All of that was there at the same time, which was really a unique experience to watch ourselves doing this there. That was part of the experience.
Rosie, I just caught for you, and we have to sort of wind it up now. Fortunately, and say amen, but I was thinking that there's something, it's been a long time because, I'm interested in dialogue and dialogue process, and why? Because I'm convinced, for all of us, we can hear all sort of things and say we learn and so on, but there's something extraordinary which is a affects us, which is what we ourselves speak. Because it's like the truth will only get into us if we ourselves can speak it in our own way, whatever it is, but we have to find the way of enabling ourselves to speak. And it's not like giving an opinion, it's not like persuading anybody, it's not by teaching anybody anything, but for me, it's actually a living, burning reality. If people just speak out of the situation, so much would come forward. So what you say by this extraordinary man in practice and other things have illustrated that very much. The theater is there in the way to enable us to speak the truth amongst ourselves.
Let there be light.
Let it be life.
Speak
Amen.
it and so. Or what Jean-Luc Picard said, make it so.
Make it so, Mr. Zula. Thank you.
Make it so.